the one thing I would like to share with people is like, if you take what we do, the barrier to entry is so low. So like, what are you going to do to stand out and be above everyone else? And if you look at what it takes to make, say your goal is to make $300,000, like Google what jobs you can make $300,000 a year doing, and then figure out how long it takes to make that amount of money in that field. And if you look at it that way, like think about the amount of time, effort, energy, and sacrifices go into that.
So let's talk about you. So where'd you come from? What did you do before insurance? What else did you do?
Yeah, dude. So I was this is the first thing I did out of college was insurance. So I went to the University of Colorado. I played lacrosse there. I did pre-med was what I was going to do. I was doing integrative physiology and biochemistry were my majors, which are perfect for learning how to sell insurance. And my wife moved to Charleston, South Carolina. Girlfriend at the time, wife now. She was going there to do this program called Teach for America, and I went with her. And I was like, we'll go and take 2 years off of school, and then we'll go back to school. And long story short, I was going to do medical sales. I didn't like it. I was searching for a job, and I found an ad about working for. It said no cap on your commission, and we were looking for people who have athletic or military experience. And so it stuck out, and I was like, I want an uncapped commission job for a couple of years. By no means was this going to be like a long-term solution for me in my mind at that time. And I got into insurance, and I can answer questions on whatever part of the journey you want, but I think a lot of people, Jimmy, think, oh, like you probably had a really fast start and didn't have a lot of struggles. But for me, dude, it was a really slow start. I didn't naturally have sales skills. Like no one in my family has really done anything sales related. It's all, doctors, and that was kind of the path, right? And so it was a lot of learning. But I think what really helped was having the background of understanding, like studying something. And dude, I give my dad a lot of credit because I got to watch what it took for him to make, he owned his own practice, was a internist, family practice doctor, right? So he made decent money, made a couple $100,000 a year. Mm-hmm. In a great year, maybe $500,000, right? But he made really good money, but he worked really hard. He'd always be up at 5 a.m. He'd leave the house by 6 a.m. He'd go do rounds on patients. He'd be gone all day. I'd go to school, practice. I'd get home at whatever, 6 or 7 o'clock, and he'd be getting home at the same time, right? And then Saturday mornings, he'd go to the hospital, do rounds. He would take calls. He still takes calls. So I think I got really lucky getting to see what it takes in the real world to make really good money. I wasn't confused that you were going to get that. There's no quick way to get rich, right? Mm-mm. And so I think this industry is often pitched as you got to, if you work a little bit, you're going to get rich quick thing. And I never believed that because I saw what it took for someone with a really high education to make a lot of money. So I think that served me well when I started because I was like, okay, to do well in this, probably gonna have to work 80 hours a week, like you would if you were a resident or a doctor. And so I had that perspective going in, which I think really helped. But yeah, dude, happy to talk about whichever part of the journey you want. But that was the one thing I would like to share with people is if you take what we do, the barrier to entry is so low. So what are you going to do to stand out and be above everyone else? And if you look at what it takes to make, say your goal is to make $300,000, Google what jobs you can make $300,000 a year doing, and then figure out how long it takes to make that amount of money in that field. And if you look at it that way, think about the amount of time, effort, energy, and sacrifices go into that. And people want to roll out of bed at 9 o'clock, make a few dials, and become a millionaire. No, that's not how the world works, No,
it's not how it works. It's funny. I had a conversation with my father. He turned 89 yesterday, and he was talking about my kids. And, they're big into my dad wants, he's old school, right? So get the job, make sure you get a pension, you get all those things, and my mother tried to talk Andrew out of getting into insurance. And because being a bagger at Stater Brothers, there was a union, there was a pension. And imagine if he would have listened to her and not followed his dream, right? He wouldn't be where he's at right now. And I was telling my father, I was like, teachers, I have the most respect for them. you know, but they just don't get paid what they deserve for the education that they've, and the training and what they have to put up with. And something that we do is we talk to people, or we go in their homes and we give them a service that I think they need. I'm not selling you a $2,000 vacuum. I'm selling you something that if something happens, it's going to take care of your family. And I think that's so important. And you're right. If I always ask people, like, how many hours do you work that are on this call? Because I want everyone to understand that you don't just do it in a day. You know what I mean? Just like you wouldn't run the Ironman competition and train one day and go, oh, I'm going to go, swim for 5 miles and bike 150 miles or whatever it is. You're not doing that. You have to work up to it. And I think that's what we have to get the agents to understand, is that you're just not going to go climb a mountain in one day. It's going to take time to get up that mountain. And then you have to learn how to come down that mountain, because going up, it's one thing, but coming down, it's a whole different process, right?
One thing I wanted to touch on real quick is, like, I see a lot of people online, like, talk about, like, you want to, like, hustle culture is great. Like, you want to work your butt off all the time. And then I see people all the time that are like, no, you want to work smarter, not harder. And for me, it's like, it's both, right? Is the answer. So it's like, you want to work really hard and then have good mentors to help you course correct. Because if you have all the knowledge in the world, but you don't do anything with it, it's useless. And if you work your ass off all the time, but you don't make any adjustments, that's also useless. Like, that's like having a Ferrari that's 6 inches off the ground and the wheels are spinning as fast as they could spin. Like, the adjustment is you lower the car 6 inches and it goes 200 miles per hour, right? But if you just sit there and spin your tires and you don't make any adjustments, you're going to spin your tires forever. I think that's the best analogy I could think of, is like, you're so close, but if you're in the car, you may not know what's wrong with it. So you can ask someone who's, outside the car, and they're like, oh, dude, you just elevate a little bit, just go down 6 inches and you'll go really fast, right? And so I think that's why it's important to, now I know what bothers people who mentor people is if you ask a lot of questions and implement nothing, then they don't want to help you anymore, right? And then and the other thing that bothers people is if you work just really hard and don't ever ask for help, then they're not going to want to help you either, because you're not willing to be humble enough to ask for help. So I think it's a combo of both. Like, you want to work really hard so that you can go, like, hey, Jimmy, this is everything that I'm doing right now. These are the calls I'm making. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm spending 60 hours a week working. Like, where can you help me? Where can I make course corrections at? And what I found from what I was doing when I wasn't having success to when I started having more success in the industry, was it was usually like really tiny tweaks, like just really small little tweaks. And I thought it was gonna be big course corrections. And it was usually just like, you're so close, but just do this slightly differently, And so I wanted to point that out with people, because
the 1%
you can't ask questions if you're not working. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're not working hard, you can't ask questions, because the person's not going to want to help you, because it's a waste of their time. And if you're working really hard, but you're not willing to get feedback, like, the person who is willing to get some feedback is going to smoke you long term, because they're humble enough to ask for the help.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. The 1% rule, there's a guy that if you could just make 1% change every day, it's very small, but over time it's humongous, right? It's the advantage is very clear. So if you were so were you always with FFL?
I was, yeah.
Okay. So you started off your first 3 years, you did okay, right? You weren't spectacular. You did good. Obviously you did good enough where you didn't leave. And then you came to Vegas. And then when did the light bulb click on? When did you think, okay, this is something I can make a career of? Like, how did that happen?
So I learned I could make a career out of it probably my first year in the business. So my first full year, like my first 3 months were rough. I was probably helping like 10 families a month, right? And my second year, or my first full year, so like January of 2018 through December of 2018, I issued $406,000 on my own pen that year. And I ran a lot of appointments, and that's what I figured out. Like, once I figured out that all sales was just getting in front of enough people and asking good questions, I was like, oh, okay, I could do this, because, I think I netted like $200,000 that year after taxes and expenses. And, looking at, again, knowing, what it took for my dad to get to where he had to get to make that time. I'm like, if I could do this in my first year in an industry, like, I can only imagine what I could do if I actually apply myself and commit to this fully. Right. So at that point, I was like, I'm going to make this career. And I decided I wasn't going to go back to school. And at that point, I was like, maybe I'll build a team one day, but I just want to sell a lot and get really good at sales. And then what I didn't account for, Jimmy, with that year is the second year I issued like 600,000, and then third year was like 900. And what I didn't account for was I just kept the same activity. I just got better because like you just get better over time. You know, you just get better at closing, you get more confident. That's all that happened. I just got more proficient at closing, and I started working less days and selling more. But what happened on the building side was actually super similar lesson as the sales side, but it's so hard to apply because if you're like me, like you want to believe in everybody, you know? And I think that this is such a simple business that everyone could do it, but I don't think a lot of people have the intestinal fortitude to go through the BS that you go through sometimes. And so what I had to learn on the building side was I had to consistently be always bringing new people on and focusing your time with the right people. Like that was the biggest thing I learned from Andrew, right? Was there's a lot of people who will waste your time, and you have to be a really good steward with your time and spend it with the right people. If you spend a bunch of time with people who, again, like I was talking about when you want to be mentored by someone and you have to implement, like if you spend a lot of time taking someone that has a bunch of potential and trying to do everything for them and, you know, go to the ends of the earth to try to help them be a successful business person, like you'll waste a lot of time in that. If you have to force someone to do stuff, they're never going to make it, right? And if you adjusted that and spent time with the person who, you know, maybe is not always there telling you how they're going to, you know, be the next integrity partner and they're going to build the biggest, baddest business ever, but they're steadily working, asking questions. And if you spend the same amount of time with that person, you really could help them blow up, right?
Yeah.
And so two things I learned, Jimmy, was like, one was I always built my business, like my biggest legs were all going to quit tomorrow. So like I always built it like Easton at that time was our biggest agency. I always built it like Easton was going to leave tomorrow. And not like I thought he was going to, but I wanted to not ever have to be reliant on one person. So while I would always help and be building him, like I would always be trying to replicate as many Eastons as possible on my team so that if they ever did leave, I wouldn't be affected. And the way our business is structured now, like we do, you know, we help 5,500, 6,000 families a month. My biggest organization is like 28% of our agency. So if that person, if that whole agency was gone tomorrow, like would it hurt a little bit? Yeah, but it wouldn't hurt nearly as bad as if that group was 60%, right?
Right.
But the other thing that I learned with that, Jimmy, was that when I was always working on building new people, it created a lot of competition within our group. And it also forced the people who, like, so Wiley's our biggest group now, right? But now I don't spend a lot of time with him because I've taught him everything I know. So I spend time building new legs, but it forces Wiley to figure stuff out on his own where I was always there to answer all the questions for him. And it lets him develop into a business person and become a confident business person. Yeah, and that's what I learned is like, you know, it's so easy to like get someone going and then spend all your time talking to them, going back and forth and having simple conversations every day and just, you know, making little tweaks and trick yourself into working, right? And just feeling like you're working. But if you're always bringing on new people and looking for new talent, it's like it'd be like if you're a Lakers fan, right, Jimmy?
Yeah.
It'd be like if the Lakers, you know, when they won their championships in like the 90s or whatever,
80s,
if they never replaced that team, dude, all those, like half those guys would, like they'd be dead and in wheelchairs, right? Like they wouldn't have a team anymore. But they're always bringing on new talent, right? And I look at this the same way. Like you always have to be bringing on new, fresh talent to compete with the other people in your group. And that way you don't ever have someone who controls you by being the majority of your team. You always have new people coming on. And it helps you as a manager too, because the most excited, easiest to work with people are brand new people. Sometimes people who have been around for a while they forget how good we have it and forget how awesome an industry we're in. They get a little salty, right? But if you're always spending time with people who are negative, you're going to be negative. But if you're always spending people, like I have a new guy that was in the office for the lock-in we did with you guys, Jake. His first month, he issued like 55 policies. The first month of December, he's doing really great. Like I love talking to him because he's a new person and he's so excited about the industry and it makes me excited again.
Right.
And he's like, wow, I've never done anything like this. I don't even know how this is legal. Like, this is amazing. But if I was spending my time with people who have been here for 3 years and always want to, oh my God, it's the leads. Oh, how dumb are the clients? Like that makes me feel crappy too. So I always want to be bringing on new people who keep reinvigorating me selfishly.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm starting to recruit a lot and I brought on 50 last year and I told Andrew, I was like, I can't get him to move the needle. And he's like, you know how you get him to move the needle? I'm like, no, he goes, you bring on new blood. The new blood will force the old people to shine because they'll be, hey, how come I'm not the shiny guy anymore? Why don't you talk to me anymore? And then it just forces that competition, right? So it makes everybody stand up to the challenge, I would say. So
I always look at like a big tryout, right? So like I have all these people and like which are the few people that I should spend the most of my time, effort, energy, and money on. And it has to be based on what they do, not what they say they're going to do, right? And I think if you look at it that way, it allows you to make sure you're allocating your time the right way.
So how do you pick a client? I mean, how do you pick a new agent? Do you have like a little checklist that you run through? Do you ask some questions? Is there some trigger points for you that, nope, they're not going to be a fit for me. I'm going to throw them to Wiley, or I'm going to throw them to Calvin, or no, this is the one I want. I'm going to start a leg under. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. Like one, like do I like working with them? Like just gut feeling. Like, do I think they're a good person? Right? Do I enjoy talking to them? Two is like when I tell them to do something, do they do it, or is it a pain in the butt to get them to do it? Right? And if they like, to clarify, like if I'm like, hey Jimmy, like I need you to go buy this many leads, I need you to spend $1,500 on this type of lead this week. Like, sounds good, man. Hey, and if you ask me some follow-up questions on it, like I'm definitely going to do it. I just have a few questions. But if someone's like, oh my gosh, like $1,500, I couldn't imagine spending that much on leads. Like if they're hard, if I give them things to do and they don't want to do it and they're always pushing back, I'm probably out. Right. And even just little things like throughout contracting and through the beginning phases, be like, hey, Jimmy, you said you want to learn about IULs. Happy to teach you everything you want to know about IULs. I need you to go through the boot camp. And then as soon as you're done with it, call me back and let's follow up on any questions you have with it. And I just wait, right? And dude, the amount of people that either won't ever go watch it or don't call you to follow up with you is 95% of the people you'll tell that to. So I look for the 5% to go, hey man, that was great. This is what I took this, and this from it. I have questions here, and here. I'm like, okay, like that guy actually followed directions. Like pretty simple, but he followed directions. I want to work with him more so than the rest of them. And so I'm just looking for people that stand out above everyone else and are a little bit different than everyone else in a good way.
That makes
just giving them things to do and again, I'm not following up. I'm not texting you every morning going, hey, Jimmy, finish the boot camp yet? I'm waiting. I'm cognizant of it. I know I told all these people to do this. And then when the one guy pops up and goes, hey man, boom, 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 where do I get leads? I'm ready to do this, and this. I have questions here. I'm like, that's my guy. Not the other people that never followed back up and circled back with me on it.
So you think it's about 5%? Is that kind of the calculations you've been coming out with?
Yeah. And to be clear, like the rest of everyone else, like there'll be people that, sell 15 to 20 policies a month and make a great career of this for themselves. But if you're talking about the people that, actually want to build a business and are willing to do what it takes, it's probably about 5% of those people. And then, each level, it kind of just narrows down until the cream rises to the top, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.